Breece Hall, is he the next great RB1? We're about to break that down and more on the Razzball Fantasy Podcast starting right now. Once again, folks, welcome back to the Razzball Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco, and I'm joined once again. It must be Thursday, folks. I'm joined by my colleague, Paul Blake. What's going on, Paul?
Oh, not much, man. What's shaking, Bobby?
Oh, I'm ready to talk about some big names. None of this, I know last week we had a shit ton of fun. Nothing wrong. I am literally on the caboose of the David Bell hype train, and I'm all in. But now we're talking about the spicy guys, the big names. We're talking today about Breece Hall, and there is barely any question about this kid being at least the top 1 or 2 picks in redraft dynasty or dynasty leagues, and he's already creeping up into that third round in redraft. So we're here to break down today all you need to know about Breece Hall. Paul's going to be breaking down all the information about his college. He's going to even talk a little smack, he told me, behind the scenes. I'm excited to hear the smack talk coming from Paul Blake. Before we do, make sure you're following us across the board, folks, at Razzball Fantasy on YouTube, on TikTok, and on Instagram. But make sure, more importantly, going to razzball.com and checking out all the great content on the baseball, football, hockey, and basketball side as well. But without further ado, let's get into Breece Hall going to the Jets. Now, Paul, educate the people. What do they need to know about Breece Hall on those New York Football Jets?
Well, yeah, man, Breece is the heater. There's no doubt about that. I have him as my 1-1, and I don't think it's even close. Yeah, Breece Hall's a second-round pick, 36th overall by the Jets, 5'11", 217, 4-star recruit coming out of Wichita, Kansas, which is not a very heavily recruited area. In fact, the whole state of Kansas isn't very heavily recruited. So he was actually a guy who was rated, so they got him first in Kansas, 135th nationally, 7th running back in the 2019 class. That's all from 247 Sports. But he didn't start that way. Rivals never got him above a 3-star. 247's a little bit better. I kind of like them a little more than Rivals. They started with a 4-star, but they just had to keep pushing him up and pushing him up and pushing him up because he kept just dominating Kansas. But you know, what's a recruiter going to do with that? You're beating up these kids in Kansas where there's maybe 6 kids in the whole state who are going to play D1 football. So they weren't really sure what they had. And I mean, I look back at his write-up there. They did call him as a second, third round pick for projections, which is, you know, kind of on there, pretty close there. But his comp was Carlos Hyde. And now you look at the comps he's getting, man. I mean, I saw some Jonathan Stewart comps. I love the Matt Forte comp. That just shows you kind of how even the site that had him rated highest was still underestimating this kid. I think I talked to you last time about the bloodlines. Roger Craig's cousin. So, you know, 49ers great. Should be in the Hall of Fame. Former Nebraska Cornhusker great. Love Roger Craig. The high knees. First thousand guy. I think that Breece Hall has that in him. Stepfather's Jeff Smith, another former Husker. Played running back for Nebraska. Later played with the Chiefs, got 1,000 all-purpose yards for the Chiefs, so that's a pretty good thing in the NFL there. If you remember Jeff Smith, I don't know how well you guys are versed with college football history, but in 1984, there was a great national championship game played between the Huskers and the Miami Hurricanes. Huskers were ranked first. Miami was ranked third. The Huskers were down by 1 as the clock ran out in the fourth quarter. Decision time. Go to two-point conversion or go to the extra point. The Huskers kick the extra point. They probably win the national title because they tied the third team. Coach Tom Osborne decided to go for 2, runs a pass play of all things, and he's throwing to Jeff Smith, the stepfather of Breece Hall. Pretty interesting story, I thought. But at any rate, Breece Hall goes on to be the 2-time Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. Started out as a true freshman in 2019, got up over 1,000 yards. 56 total TDs in that 3-year time at ISU, 4,500 total yards in 3 seasons, scored a TD in 24 consecutive games, and that broke a 50-year record in the NCAA. Pretty impressive work there when you break a record that stood for 50 years. He's got a great nose for the goal line, has really good pad level, and he just drops those pads and he powers through the tacklers. Now, I kind of told you I was going to talk a little shit on someone. To me, it's Ken Walker. I see some people talking Ken Walker above Breece Hall, and I think that's just silly. You know, I mean, If you like Jamie Eisenberg, he loves him up there. I like what Jamie Eisenberg does, but let Jamie Eisenberg and his followers take Ken Walker. You don't want Ken Walker. You want Breece Hall. Okay, let me run through what Breece Hall did against the toughest competition, because I think that's what matters most in college football. You get a lot of gimmies throughout there. You get Elon, you're playing against freaking DeVry, or whoever you're playing, the weak sisters of the poor. You get some kind of easy matchups there where you can rack up yards. And Walker did that. Not saying that Breece Hall didn't. He did that as well. But you look at 2019 Oklahoma, Hall racks up 110 tough yards against them. 2020 Oklahoma, a lot of NFL players on that Oklahoma defense. 139 yards and 2 TDs there. 2021 Baylor, maybe not to the level of Oklahoma, but that's a quality team. Quality players at Baylor, tons of talent in Texas. Racked up 190 yards and 3 TDs against Baylor in 2021. So those are some of the tough matchups for Breece Hall. Walker doesn't really match up like that. I mean, he had a great game against Michigan, and we know that was a really good defense. So I've got to give him credit for the Michigan game. But you look at Walker's other stuff. 2021 against the Nebraska defense wasn't loaded with Ndamukong Suh or Levante David. Not a superstar defense, but they were quality defense. It played well together. Walker only managed 61 yards, 3.2 yards per carry against Nebraska, and Michigan State was in that game. And they wound up winning that game in overtime. So it's not like it was a big lead and they just stopped handing the ball to him. He was in that game the whole time. They needed a big game from him, and he fell short against a defense that was good, but let's face it, this ain't the monsters of the Midway, 2021 Ohio State. Now, Michigan State did get run off the field in that, so they were trailing. So maybe that mitigated Walker's ability to put up some numbers, but 25 total yards there, that ain't going to cut it. Clemson, so obviously Walker started off in the ACC, then he transferred to the Big Ten. Against Clemson 2020, 19 yards at 3.2 yards per carry. 2019 Clemson, 16 yards, 2.7 yards per carry. So to me, what do you do against your peers? What do you do against the fellow NFL type players? Walker falls short. Hall still, he handles it, man. One thing I love about him, he doesn't run into the back of his blockers. Seems kind of silly, seems kind of obvious, but you'd be surprised NFL players do that. And it's pretty frustrating to watch them do that, especially if you have them on your fantasy team. I don't see Hall doing that at the college level. I wouldn't expect him to pick up that habit in the NFL. Patient runner, great vision, catches the ball on all kinds of routes. We're not talking just screens or just little bubble passes or just little flares where no one's really covering him. He catches the ball against tight coverage by safeties, not just linebackers. 4.39 40-yard dash. He's got the great speed, amazing spin move, rhythmic cuts. Yeah, man, I just love this guy. He gets behind his pads, runs with power when he needs to, runs away from you when he needs to. It's all here for me. I'm taking Hall first, 1-1, and Walker's probably not even coming off the board until after those receivers. I'd probably even take Walker after a guy like Jahan Dotson, so that's going to bump him down to maybe 8th and 9th or so on my list, and it's kind of where I have these two top backs.
So the good thing about Breece Hall, the first thing I noticed is that player profiler comps have this guy compared to some of the best running backs in football. Jonathan Taylor, Zeke Elliott, Matt Forte. When we talked about this previously, you liked that Matt Forte comp, didn't you?
Yes, absolutely. Love that comp. But we've seen I know he's basically, Hall's getting all this praise heaped on him, right? He's always exceeded expectations. So it's going to be difficult for him to exceed expectations here. I don't mean to limit him, but man, I think Matt Forte is a great comp for him.
Okay. Well, these guys, the big thing for all three of those guys, they had very productive rookie seasons, and especially for fantasy football, they on average, those three guys averaged 19 points per game. That's top 5 running back numbers based on last year's points per game numbers. So that's the one thing that gets me a little bit excited about Breece Hall, but we just have to remember that rookie running backs, it is kind of a crapshoot. Like, everyone's going to point at Elijah Mitchell, but no one was drafting Elijah Mitchell last year in redraft. I'm sorry. It became the injury of Raheem Mostert in week 1, the lack of Trey Sermon's development. But when you're looking at the players that actually were drafted last year, not a lot of them crushed their ADP. Like Najee Harris finished as RB9 in points per game, but he was RB11 in ADP, so right on par. But then you look at Javonte Williams, Michael Carter, Stevenson, Chuba Hubbard, guys that were being drafted last year, none of them really killed their ADP. And outside of Najee Harris, no one was inside the top 24. So running, and even if you go to 2020, it's the same concept. Like guys like DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor, those guys really didn't emerge until the second half of the season. So a lot of this has to be baked in because I'm starting to look at his ADP. He's already in the third round. And he's probably going to continue to rise once you start getting into that second round. The question comes, what is the Jets' thoughts on Michael Carter? Is he going to be a committee back? Is Michael Carter going to handle third downs? What's Breece Hall in pass pro? Do you have any questions about his pass protection, or do you think he can jump right in and work on all three downs?
I think he can jump in and work on all three downs. He's not a huge back, but at 5'11", 217, that's a pretty big kid. So I think he can take on those pass rushers that kind of sneak through. It's going to be a learning curve for him because it always is with these college players trying to pick up pass pro. That's always something that holds them back. Plus, it seems like it's kind of a good excuse that coaches kind of throw around, like we're not quite ready to hand everything over to this kid and let his head get too big and have him get maybe get lazy at practice, whatever they may be thinking. Hard to get in a coach's mind, but that's kind of the game we play here. But pass pro is a concern because I think it's got to be a concern for all these running backs, as you just illuminated.
Yeah. So I think the other thing I will say is the Jets quietly have built a very solid offensive line. And one of the keys to running back play is a dominant offensive line. And last year, PFF ranked the Jets 11th overall after the season. They have lost Morgan Moses, but brought in Laken Tomlinson, who's one of the better guards in football from the 49ers. And if they could get anything out of Mekhi Becton to play right tackle, they are pretty set left to right. And they could easily have a top 10 line, which you got to love for him. The other aspect of this, too, is that the Mike LaFleur comes from the Shanahan tree, are not shy about starting rookie running backs. I mean, if you want to go way back, Steve Slayton, Alfred Morris, there's been plenty of examples of the Shanahan scheme leaning into a rookie. But if you just look at Mike LaFleur's experiences, it actually has been the opposite. So in 2014, he coached under Kyle Shanahan for the Browns. They used a dual-back rookie system with Isaiah Crowell and Terrence West. Neither guy really finished high in fantasy. I know those guys aren't Breece Hall. But then you look at Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman comes in 2015, and it ends up being Devonta Freeman to be the star running back in that season. So even though Coleman was being drafted in fantasy, it ended up being Freeman, who went undrafted, being the guy for that team. So I do want to watch practice reports and OTAs and stuff, but let's dive into his ADP because right now his consensus 101 in Dynasty rookie drafts, but he's also going at 35th overall according to some best ball ADP. So at those draft slots, are you all in? Are you taking him at 101? Are you taking him in redraft at 35th overall?
Definitely taking him at 1-1 in the Dynasty rookie draft. To me, he's that by far. I do kind of worry about that redraft ranking, though. A
little bit.
I think that's pretty aggressive. I think a lot of people, and this is just kind of going for general redraft, I think they're kind of turning the page on guys like Dalvin Cook a little bit early. Everyone seems to be off of Alvin Kamara. These players didn't forget how to play. Sure, the injuries are kind of adding up, but and I know everyone wants to get rid of a running back after they turn 27. But I think these guys have a little bit more run in them than what people are making them out to be. I mean, I watched Dalvin Cook last year. He did get hurt, but man, when he was healthy, and especially even when he wasn't, remember he had that kind of banged up shoulder that he was running with?
Yep.
He seemed to get better with the hurt shoulder because it was like, oh, shoot, I don't want people to touch me, which should be the rule when you're running anyway. But when he was kind of running like that, he was really impressive. And yeah, man, I think people are pulling the plug a little bit too early on some of these backs, even a lower end back like Josh Jacobs. Of course, I would want Breece Hall above Jacobs, but I just think kind of that group think on these running backs is going to push them down. And I think that's where the value is going to be. I love Breece Hall. Obviously, I've written all this stuff up. I think he's great, but I'm probably passing on him on that range for the redraft.
Yeah, I think I agree to an extent for now. I think I'm okay with the back end of the third where he's going, but there's no way this is a rocket ship. He's going to go, and I think a lot of it has to do with the development of Zach Wilson. If you start hearing reports of Zach Wilson, because he has all the weapons he needs now to succeed. Top 10 offensive line, solid running backs. He's got 3 solid receivers. He's got 2, NFL caliber tight ends. He's got everything. So if Zach Wilson takes the next step, you have to just buy it because if you have a top 10 offensive line, good receiving core, good quarterback, you're going to be probably a solid running back for fantasy. So I do agree that I am a little hesitant, but I think right now I'm tentatively excited to see what this kid could do in 2022. But that's all we have for today. Once again, I'm your host, Bobby LaMarco. That's Paul Blake. This is, once again, what you need to know about Breece Hall and the New York Jets. Make sure you join us later today. We're going to be talking about another player, same city, different team, another rookie. But once again, I'm your host. This is the Razzball Fantasy Podcast on YouTube. Make sure you're checking us out on YouTube, but also make sure you check us out on TikTok and Instagram. For Paul Blake, I'm Bobby LaMarco. We're out of here, folks.